Well, we certainly know how Zira feels about these, but I wonder what the rest of them think. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. Today I'm going to be ranking the 10 Planet of the Apes movies as part of my franchise Rankography series. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. So what is a Rankography exactly? Well, it's my ranking of a filmography, whether that be a director's output, an actor's appearances, or even an entire franchise. My rankographies are based on personal preference, and I rank movies according to how much I enjoyed them, rather than any specific technical merit or attribute. Remember, this is just my ranking, not the ranking, so be sure to post your own personal ranking of the Planet of the Apes franchise in the comments below. It's hard to believe that this franchise is almost 60 years old now. All of these films have their origins in Pierre Boulle's novel, and there are plenty of similarities among the 10 movies, but there are also a lot of different ways they approached the story and general concept. Much like the Apes, this franchise has evolved quite a bit over the decades. For me, this is an interesting franchise to rank, because some of these films are super easy to place, while others are extremely difficult for me. Unlike so many long-running franchises, nostalgia doesn't really play a part in Planet of the Apes for me. I saw the original 1968 film as a kid, but never really considered myself much of an Apes fan at the time. I never even saw the Caesar trilogy in theaters, and only caught them after they were released on Blu-ray, so there's no big screen bias there either. This really is one ranking where nostalgia doesn't play a part at all, and my most recent franchise rewatch was the determining factor here. I've already reviewed all 10 of these movies on this channel, so if you want to check those out for some more in-depth thoughts on each of them, I'll put links in the description below, and also link some of them up in the cards as we go along. Alright, let's get this rankography started. Coming in at number 10, Planet of the Apes, the 2001 remake. Well, one of these movies had to be at the bottom of the barrel of talking monkeys. I know this one has its nostalgia-based fans, largely people who saw it as kids and were introduced to the Planet of the Apes franchise as a result, but I imagine this placement isn't gonna be that searing of a hot take. Nearly 30 years after the original run of movies ended, a remake wasn't exactly the worst idea. I know we tend to have negative opinions of remakes, but I think there was some potential for something good to come out of a new take on the story. Unfortunately, whatever this movie was pretty close to the worst idea. It's not really a remake, not really a reboot, certainly not a sequel. It's sort of a reimagining, but only in the loosest sense of the word. There are a lot of factors that contributed to this not being a great movie, but one of the most significant, I think, was the decision to put Tim Burton in the director's chair. He's made some decent remakes, and some not so decent ones, but his typical aesthetic just feels at odds here. This is a really artificial looking and almost campy film, and the focus on trying to be Burton quirky means that the themes don't have a chance to come through at all. I think Mark Wahlberg was also a weird choice to play the lead here. His Taylor-like character could have been okay, but he plays it all too seriously and far too bland. As a remake, reimagining, reinterpretation, whatever, this film makes some pretty extensive changes to the story. Changing things up isn't an awful idea in and of itself, but many of the specific changes made here undermine the themes present in the original story, and result in a dull yet haphazardly plotted film with a nonsensical ending. One bright spot that shines through, though, is Rick Baker's makeup and prosthetic creations. The ape designs here are still practical, like the original films, but look remarkably realistic compared to those movies. The actors completely disappear within the makeup, and it's hard to tell who's playing who until they talk. Coming in at number 9, Battle for the Planet of the Apes. After an impressive run of 5 movies in as many years, the original series of Planet of the Apes films ended with this 5th and final movie. To be fair, the 4th movie wasn't all that great either, but it did set up for something potentially interesting that just wasn't capitalized on here. For a movie with battle in the title, which features battle sequences and a human-ape war, this is a remarkably dull movie, with a story that drags and feels much longer than the sub-90 minutes it actually is. The cautionary anti-war messages and continued speciesism themes are still thoughtful, but it's clear that the franchise storyline was running out of steam and bite. It's just less impactful of a movie than all that came before, so it's understandable that this was planned as the final film all along. Even though the Planet of the Apes movies were popular and continued to be relatively successful at the box office, the budget steadily declined as the series went on. This was noticeable on the previous film, but the low budget finally noticeably hampered this one. The costumes and most of the makeup and masks look shoddy, they reuse audio samples and even whole shots multiple times throughout the film. Obviously, the filmmakers had to work with what they were given, but the end result was pretty poor, and unable to match the scope and scale of the movie it was trying to tell. Despite being the worst of the original series, this movie isn't all bad. Roddy McDowall reprises his role as Caesar, his second reprised role in this franchise. Caesar is much less fiery than he was in the previous film, and taps into a more Cornelius-like personality, if Cornelius had been in a leadership role, that is. This is probably McDowall's weakest Apes outing, but he's still pretty good, and the sole bright spot in an otherwise underwhelming sequel. Coming in at number 8, Beneath the Planet of the Apes. Okay, so I imagine most people were probably with me for those last two movies, but I suspect this is where my list might start to deviate from other people's, because it seems like quite a few people enjoy this one, at least for an original series sequel. I know we've had 9 sequels, remakes, and reboots since the original movie, some of which very good, but I still contend that Planet of the Apes should have been a one-and-done film, especially with this as the first sequel in the franchise. Perhaps matched only by Escape from the Planet of the Apes, the following year, Beneath is very much a film of two halves. They're linked, but they're still very distinct from one another. The first half is basically a rehash of the first movie. We get another astronaut traveling through time, this time James Franciscus as the Charlton Heston look-alike, playing Brent, the Taylor act-alike. Just like in the original movie, this astronaut discovers talking apes, falls for Nova, and does the chase, escape, repeat thing several times. It's basically the first movie over again, condensed into half of this film, and sadly, this retread is among the better aspects of the movie. The second half of the film takes some wild turns. Now, I do think we need to give the filmmakers and writers some credit for trying to do something a little bit different here, but it's just too out there. The beneath part of Beneath the Planet of the Apes is easily my least favorite section of the film. There are some fun and cheesy post-apocalyptic sets, but after the increased action of the first half, the second half increases the sci-fi, and things get weird. I realize that probably sounds a bit silly, considering the whole idea of Planet of the Apes is weird, but assuming you can accept the premise of talking apes as normal here, this movie goes even further with the weirdness, burying a ludicrous sci-fi story within an already wild sci-fi premise. This movie suffers from quality drops across the board for technical elements, especially the editing, and the themes are a bit more blatant, but man, what an ending! All of these films were bleak, but you can't get more bleak than the end of this one. Coming in at number 7, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. This was the 4th film of the original series, and the first of the original Caesar storyline. Not counting the spaceship time travel aspect that was present in the first few films, this was the first time we saw a time jump in the series, with this movie set 20 years after the 3rd film, in a world that was very different from what we'd seen before. It's still recognizable as our world, but it's a futuristic-looking movie, with a lot of jumpsuit costumes, brutalist architecture, and plenty of moody night shots. Many of these things were due to the film's low budget, which was noticeable, but unlike Battle, this budget didn't have a major negative effect on the film, and the filmmakers were able to make it work. Bleak was always the name of the Planet of the Apes game, and there's certainly no shortage of that here, with a plot featuring the downfall of human civilization, but it's also a very angry movie, probably the angriest of the franchise. It's super violent and pretty bloody, especially if you watch the original uncut version that was intended to be the final cut of the film, until preview screenings scared the crap out of a bunch of kids, forcing them to recut it for a much more toned-down theatrical release. But this is an uprising film, and the themes are heightened here, with much of the story being a thinly veiled allegory for oppression and racial injustice, drawing upon real-life events of the then recent past. Bleak, but a different flavor of bleak than we had seen before. An interesting development of this film, though, was the fact that this movie made you root for the apes. Sure, you rooted for individuals like Zira and Cornelius in past films, but this was the first movie in the franchise to really get you on board with the apes as an entire group. Much of this is thanks to the presence and performance of Roddy McDowall as Caesar, playing the son of his own previous character Cornelius, with a fiery passion that works impressively well. Coming in at number 6, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. That 7th spot film is very mid-level for me, but we've finally crossed the threshold into Apes movies I enjoy here, with the 10th film in this franchise. This movie is part of the reboot series, with plenty of references to the Caesar trilogy films, but this big time jump makes the film feel a bit separate from that trilogy. It sets up for what's likely going to be at least another trilogy, so I kind of consider this a 4th era of the Apes franchise, even though you could still condense it into the 3rd era too. Many generations and roughly 300 years after the Caesar films were faced with a very life after people aesthetic, with the natural world taking over what humankind left behind. This is a movie that deeply roots itself in Caesar's legacy, and having only seen the movie once so far, I can't decide if that's helpful to the film or if it hurts it. It gives us something familiar and beloved to immediately grab onto, but it also sets a really high bar and some difficult to overcome comparisons. This movie immediately jumps into some grand world-building ideas, and gives us some decent characters too. The new protagonist, Noah, is pretty good, and I'm curious to see where the story goes with him, assuming we get more of these films. The antagonist, Proximus, is definitely a little underutilized here, but he's okay, and is an important driving force behind many of the film's themes. May is among the better human characters we've had in this franchise, though we're still left with a lot of unanswered questions regarding her and her potential future role in upcoming films. Those 3 are the main characters of this movie, but Raka, the compassionate and funny orangutan, stole the show for me, and I really hope we see some more from this character. This movie's story follows a very familiar hero's journey path, but it's still satisfying, despite having some pacing issues and a fairly slow start. But the really noteworthy aspect of this movie is the photorealistic CGI. The motion capture work and VFX have been impressive since Rise of the Planet of the Apes, but what a phenomenal jump here. Definitely the highlight of the film. Coming in at number 5, Escape from the Planet of the Apes. I think I might get a little pushback on the placement of this film, but this is easily the best of the original series sequels for me, and is actually the movie from the original 5 that I like rewatching the most. Escape is the 3rd film of the original series, but it certainly had its work cut out for it. Without giving anything specific away, Beneath the Planet of the Apes was set up as a pretty definitive franchise end. This movie requires perhaps a little suspension of disbelief. Okay, we are talking about talking monkeys here, so a little more suspension of disbelief, but if you can get past some of the glaring overconvenience of the very beginning of the film, this one is really good. It's more than a rehash, more than a mere reversal of the first film. Escape is an inversion of that story. Here, we see Zira and Cornelius journey to the past, traveling to Taylor's time, to our time, ending up in then modern-day Los Angeles. Finding themselves in a human-dominated past, Zira, Cornelius, and all of the 70s humans they encounter are understandably confused. But what was a violent and chaotic plot point in the original film ends up being surprisingly calm and entertaining here. There is a slightly tense hearing, but the first half of this film also has a lot of funny fish-out-of-water moments, or ape out of time, as it were, and almost feels like a goofy offbeat sitcom with bouncy music and playful montages of Zira and Cornelius dressing in early 70s fashion and exploring LA. But things take a dark turn in the second half, progressing towards the then practically trademark bleak Planet of the Apes ending. It takes on this dangerous aura, but packs a hefty thematic punch, among the best of the franchise, posing some thought-provoking moralistic questions. In this film, Zira and Cornelius are finally the stars rather than just side characters, and this is easily the franchise best for both the characters as well as Kim Hunter and Roddy McDowall. They add a lot of emotion to the story, and it's extremely easy to root for the ape couple in this self-prophesizing backdoor prequel full circle inversion of the franchise. Coming in at number 4, Planet of the Apes, the 1968 original. With long-running franchises like this, sometimes it can be tough to beat the original film, the one that started it all and established the world, characters, and themes, the foundation of the franchise. I might be a bit weird in this opinion, because Escape from the Planet of the Apes is extremely close to this one for me, but this first movie is still number 1 of the original films for me. There are other movies in this franchise that I like more, but it's undeniable that this paved the way for the series, and is an iconic sci-fi film that inspired so many other movies. It's got the memorable Taylor, played by Charlton Heston, an interesting story, lines of dialogue that have gone down in history to the point where people know them but don't even know what movie they're from. This original movie certainly has a different visual style than the Apes movies we have today, but even so, the makeup and prosthetic work here is very strong, especially for the time. There's a little initial goofiness when you watch it now, and it's obvious that there's a person under there, but the makeup is transformative nonetheless, and I think still holds up really well. I love the idea of talking apes as much as the next person, and the action, although tame by today's standards, is entertaining, and understandably captured the attention of countless kids through the decades. But the thing that I've always appreciated the most about this film, even when I was younger, is the themes. While others loved the chase scenes and fights, I was captivated by the courtroom scene and all the scientific talk. The allegories for classism, racism, xenophobia, government cover-ups, and more. Social commentary has always been a big part of this franchise, but this movie in particular was somehow able to seamlessly blend it into fun science fiction in a way that few movies have been able to do since. All these years of rewatches later, Nova still stands out to me as a bit of a pointless character, but this movie does introduce Zira and Cornelius, who are second only to the rebooted Caesar as my favorite characters in the franchise. Coming in at number 3, Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Well, we've made it into the top 3 movies, and I know you all realize which 3 movies are left. I know this trilogy was an entry point into the franchise for an awful lot of fans, but I did see the original movies first, and when I got around to the Caesar trilogy that first time, I enjoyed them, but it wasn't until this most recent rewatch, with the benefit of review writing dissection and analysis, that I realized just how much I enjoyed them. I will say, I am a big fan of this whole Caesar trilogy, so depending on the day, I could easily swap them around in this ranking. They're all really close for me. Rise of the Planet of the Apes was the first film of the reboot series, and the first of the Caesar trilogy. Reboots are kind of a scary concept in franchises, and rarely work, but this is one of those rare exceptions to the rule. This movie pays homage to the original film and sequels, drawing a lot of story inspiration from Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, including the character of Caesar. It's logical in the context of the franchise, and works as sort of an alternate prequel to what we already know, but also has its own new take on the story, offering up a very satisfying blend of old and new, even beyond simple Easter eggs and references. This movie has a lot more human focus than the rest of the trilogy, and I do think that James Franco feels a little miscast in the role of Will, but luckily the film does a good job of shifting its focus fairly quickly. Franco's Will isn't the protagonist, even though it might initially seem that way. Instead, that honor falls to Caesar. This Caesar has a different origin story than the original series Caesar, but his role in the story is still pretty similar. That said, I think the reboot Caesar is the strongest, most layered character we have in the entire franchise. He's interesting and emotionally complex, and it's wild to think that this film is just the start of his character. He undergoes such an arc and such character growth as the trilogy plays out. With a lot of ape-only scenes, this movie heavily relies on visual storytelling. There are no actors wearing ape prosthetics here. Instead, the apes are presented as real apes, not humanoid sci-fi creations like the original films. In order to do this, they created some really impressive CGI based on motion capture performances. The visuals certainly improved a good deal over the course of this trilogy, but still, this starting point is really fantastic, largely thanks to some great motion capture work by Andy Serkis as Caesar. This is just the beginnings of a role he would continue to embody for 6 years, but even in this first film, he's already able to get the character's physicality and soul-stirring emotion across. Coming in at number 2, War for the Planet of the Apes. I know I mentioned it before, but I just want to reiterate that I could easily swap around the ranking placement of all of the films in this trilogy. This is the third and final film of the Caesar trilogy, and wow, certainly not a movie one would ever expect to come from the 1968 original, and not even really one you would expect based on the 2 previous films of this reboot series. This is a movie that's definitely in line with those other Caesar films, following the continuing storyline and character arcs, but it's still a very different type of movie. You'd expect a movie called War for the Planet of the Apes to be an action-packed film with big battles between humans and apes, and there is some action and some fighting here, but this is more of a character-centric war drama, a thoughtful examination of the extremes that war and conflict can push people and apes, too. Compared to the rest of this trilogy, War is a slower-paced film. There's a lot more discussion and drama to the movie, and a good chunk of the film focuses on a prisoner of war story, inspired by several non-Apes 60s films, including The Great Escape and The Bridge on the River Kwai. This is easily the darkest tale of the trilogy, and maybe the darkest of the franchise, though Conquest of the Planet of the Apes might have something to say about that. But it's also the most emotional of the reboot series, really capping off the Caesar journey. It's also an aptly named film. This isn't just a war between humans and apes, it's also an internal war for Caesar, as he struggles to not lose himself during his search for revenge. It's a war between species, but it's also a war for Caesar's soul. As in the previous 2 films of the trilogy, Andy Serkis delivers an emotionally gripping motion capture performance. This movie was released only 6 years after Rise, but the visual improvements are substantial, and this is pretty much photorealistic, with the best VFX of the Caesar trilogy. Definitely a noteworthy film on so many levels. So that means my number 1 Planet of the Apes film is Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. You know, I've always thought that this movie and Rise of the Planet of the Apes would make much more sense if their names had been switched. And even though I could also switch their placements in this list, depending on the day, today, Dawn comes out on top. Not just for the Caesar trilogy, but for the franchise as a whole. Not bad for a sequel to a reboot. Picking up 10 years after the events of Rise, this movie found itself in an interesting position. It had a lot of story freedom, since Rise did a lot of the heavy lifting for setting up the rebooted storyline and characters, but it also set a really high bar that, luckily, this movie was able to at least match, if not overcome. This film does have a story that's pretty straightforward at first glance, but there are these layers of thematic complexity that greatly add to what could have been an overly simple plot, drawing inspiration from Battle for the Planet of the Apes. You could certainly make arguments to the contrary, but I think this movie offers the most interesting blend of human and ape stories of the series. The humans aren't that great on their own, but there are some good interactions between Caesar and the core group of human characters that are really captivating to watch. The source of another potential argument, but I think this film also features the strongest antagonist of the series. There's a lot of complexity to Koba. He does some horrible things. You're not meant to like or root for him, maybe not even have sympathy for him, but you definitely understand his motivations. I'm sounding like a broken record here with these reboot films, but the VFX are really impressive here again. And it goes without saying at this point that Andy Serkis and the other ape actors turn in great motion capture performances. War was probably the most emotional film in the franchise, but I love the nuance and depth to this film. Here, Caesar has to grapple with balancing his responsibility and his pacifist nature, while dealing with leadership strategy and the potential betrayal. This is just the middle of his journey and character arc, but it's definitely a defining point in time for him, and a big part of what makes him the character that he becomes. This is a thematically strong film, honing in on anti-war themes, but examining the gray areas of conflict as well. Dawn is intelligent, thematically moving, and surprisingly nuanced, but also functions equally well as an entertaining popcorn blockbuster, which gives it a bit of an edge, because you can watch it no matter what mood you're in. Alright, so that's my rankography of the Planet of the Apes franchise. 10 movies, 56 years, and a whole lot of stinking paws. What does your ranking look like? I'd love to see some reasoning for your order, so be sure to post it in the comments below. Remember, I've already reviewed all 10 of these movies, so you could check those videos out if you want some more in-depth discussion of each, as well as my ratings, pros and cons, and even tailored film recommendations. And if you're interested in buying any of these movies, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this rankography, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it to see more videos like this, as well as movie reviews. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies. The way life should be.